Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime Series with me, Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's leadership segment, he's a consultant, speaker, and author. Presents the fifth generation of his family's business and 170 years of experience with organizational success. His new book, Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. I love this title. Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. Presents 23 years of primary research into why businesses fail from an entertaining and thought-provoking perspective. Please welcome to the show, Larry Mandelberg. Larry, how are you doing?
I'm doing outstanding, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you. And I know that we've been wanting to do it for a while, and finally we're here. So I'm glad we've got to this point. So Larry, tell us a bit about you. There's such a vast amount of experience that you've been working in business, and just give us a bit of background about where you started, who you are, for the audiences that don't know.
Sure. It's definitely an uncommon background. I wouldn't call it unique. I was raised as a fifth generation family business owner. The family's business started in the 1850s in hides and furs. And as you might well imagine, over those years, there were many, many changes. So the organization had to adapt and change if it was going to survive. And it did. And part of that survival involved the concept that's known today as paying it forward. The idea is, I'm going to learn something and I'm going to teach you what I've learned so you don't have to learn it. You can go from there forward. And I was blessed with that knowledge, which is why I say I have 170 years of business experience, because I have that accumulated background. The bug to be in business manifest in me more as an entrepreneur. I call entrepreneurship a non-fatal, incurable disease. And like all diseases, it has to be managed. So I am a non-recovering serial entrepreneur, among other things. And I've owned 13 different businesses in my life, from retail to pure service to equipment rental to just candle making, coaching, 3 technology firms, a very broad swath of business experience. And one of the things I found out about myself was that I get bored with management. What I love is I love creating something and building something, and then I lose all interest in it. I'm not a manager, which leads me to a little piece that links to the book. There's this philosophical approach to organizations called corporate life cycle theory. We all live in that world, and that anybody involved in business lives in that world of corporate life cycle theory. And I exist as a human being in a place where I don't fit well in a managerial role, in a maintenance role. So I learned that very quickly and stopped bothering doing it. Yeah. That's when I decided to write the book and to start approaching the world a little differently. Let me say just one more thing. I've always approached business from a different perspective than most people. For example, I've never believed in traditional marketing. I think it's ridiculous waste of time and money. There's people that are really, really good at it. Let them do whatever they want. I'm not good at it. I've never been an employee. I've never worked for a company I didn't own. And I don't understand how to create a call to action that inspires anybody. I don't think the way other people think. So my approach to marketing has always been, I'm going to find a company that's very successfully selling to the same market I want to sell to. Not the same product or service, but the same market. And I go to them and I help them sell to their market. And through them, I get access to their market. So let me just give you one very simple number. In the mid-1990s, we were one of the top 30 Microsoft solution providers internationally, as defined by Microsoft. This isn't a Larry definition. There were 30 of us invited to a private event up in Seattle at corporate headquarters. So that's where that comes from. And I talked to the people who manage California, and I said, why are you sending your techs to your salespeople to these meetings? The people that are the buyers there are bringing their techs. So the buyers come and the techs ask the questions and the salespeople don't know the answers. You need a tech who knows how to sell. Let me send my techs who know how to sell to those meetings for you. They said, okay. Microsoft referred me $1 million worth of labor sales in the next 12 months.
Wow.
That cost me less than $1,000 that first meeting. And I got over $1 million in labor revenue out of it in 1 year.
Yeah. And just listening to that, it's, I align with your thinking around traditional marketing. It's not something I do. It's not something I've ever done really well. And having a strategic alliance or strategic partner that helps you get to where you're going, I think that's a really good way. But Larry, you speak about, or your book's name is Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. And as the title says, if businesses don't fail, why do they commit suicide? Because that sounds quite illogical, like intentional failure. Tell us what you understand about this.
Yes. So when I was roughly 13, I'm going to say 13, I'm pretty sure it was 13. It's in the book. I'd have to look because I did the research before I put it in there. I was in my dad's office. I was working when I was 8 years old, right? My dad said, this business put this roof over your head and this food on the table. If you're not in school, you're going to work. So when I woke up in the morning, I went to work. And then they took me to school, right? And then after school, if I didn't have sports or some school-related activity, I went back to work. So I was in his office and he said, how in the world did we go from 0 automobile manufacturers to over 300 automobile manufacturers down to 3 in just 30 years? How did that happen? And if you think about that, that's a pretty stunning idea. It's not quite right. And I do I put the facts in the book, but it's close. We went from no automobile manufacturers in this country to hundreds and then down to just a handful in a very short period of time. How does that happen? So that triggered my thoughts. Why does any business fail, right?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur and knowing my sweet spot, I had to figure out a segment of the market that I could research that was consumable for my research. I couldn't research everything. So I narrowed the market and I went looking for what the reasons they failed. And what I found is that there's only 3 reasons businesses fail. Now, I haven't answered your question yet, but I'm going to right now. Be clear about the title. It's not saying that businesses don't choose to fail, they choose to kill themselves. The point I'm trying to make is that business failure happens because of leadership failure.
Yeah.
No business ever failed due to an external force. Now, I want to also preface this by saying that my research did not include retail businesses. One of the 4 criteria was one of the 4 demographic criteria of my research candidates was no primary sources of revenue from retail activities. So I know that retail's a little bit different and it's not something I'm well skilled at, but I do know of retail stories that survived the pandemic. And I write about Disney, which is as retail an organization as there is. And Disney proves my point. So I believe that my theory that the hypothesis, the proof of concept, etc., is valid for retail organizations. So again, the point here is that if an organization fails, it's because leadership failed. It's always internal, which means if the leadership failed, they didn't do what they needed to do to make the business succeed, which means they killed the business. Now, I know that suicide is intentional, but I couldn't find a better word. And with the title, what you're trying to do with the book is get somebody to say, whoa, what's that? And then they look at the subtitle, and the subtitle says, How to Survive Success and Thrive in Good Times and Bad.
Yeah.
So that gets you to, if that's true, then what do I have to do to avoid failure, to avoid self-inflicted suicide? So that's the story about the book title.
I love that. And as you were speaking to, the research, you say you have 3 reasons. Number 1, literally being the leaders failing at keeping the business alive. What are those other 2 reasons you can share?
Well, that's not a reason. That's a reality. The question would be, what did they fail to do that would have kept the organization alive? So there's 3 things, and I call them the 3 Ps, and that's short for purpose, performance, and people. I call them organizational imperatives. If you don't do these 3 things, your organization will fail. It may take 200 years, but it will fail. And if you look at Sears, which is an American, very large American company that went bankrupt in the last 20 years, you can see how they failed at the third P. So what are those Ps? The first one is clarity of purpose. If you don't have everybody in your organization 100% aligned on the same objectives, with the same understanding and the same intent, you are wasting either time, money, or human resources, or some combination thereof, because everybody isn't aligned. And I know that people say this to me all the time. What do you mean? We know what we do. We're a law firm. Okay. Take 20 employees and ask them what your purpose is. You'll get 20 different answers. That's not alignment.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to tell me what product you sell or what service you sell. I'm asking you to tell me what your purpose is. And it's bigger than that. It's what are we trying to be when we grow up? It's what kind of an environment do we want to be living in our work? Because we spend more time at work than we do out of work. It's what is the value we're delivering and who cares about what that value is? And when we find the people who care about that value, how do we deliver it to them? Those are the things that make up purpose. And if you don't have that in writing, you don't have a purpose. End of story. Number one. Number two, consistency of performance. Quality has nothing to do with it. McDonald's is the most successful retailer on the planet. Some would say Amazon is. McDonald's is successful not because they sell good food, and they're not successful because they sell cheap food. They're successful because when you walk into a McDonald's anywhere on the planet and you order something, you know what's on the menu, you see it, you order it, and it tastes the same wherever you go. They have perfect consistency. If you can't make commitments to your employees, your vendors, and your customers, and guarantee them, rock solid guarantee, when I tell you we're going to do this, we are going to do it, and you can go to the bank and stake your life on it. That's consistency of performance. If you can't do that, you can't grow. And if you can't grow, you die. The third one is engagement of people. This is a little tricky. Engagement, I call it the holy grail of human resources. Everybody has a different definition of what engagement means. And I do. I have my own definition of what engagement means. But to me, engagement means I feel like I am part of the company and the company depends on me just like I depend on them. And while if I leave, it will hurt the company more than it will hurt me if the company leaves me, I still feel like I'm an integral part of the organization. I'm engaged. And creating that engagement is absolutely critical so that people feel like they matter. Everybody, no matter what job they have. And the best example I have of that came from my wife, who used to sell phone systems right when digital telephones started coming online back in the late 80s and early 90s. And she used to call the receptionist the chief greeter or the chief introduction officer. And she said, what do you think would happen if you had a crappy receptionist? Everybody that comes to your organization is going to have a bad experience.
Yeah.
Probably the lowest paid person, she or he, in the company, probably has the most boring job in the company, probably gets very little respect. And yet that's the person that's the doorway to everything in your company. Don't you think she deserves or he a little respect? So it's clarity of purpose, consistency of performance, engagement of people.
Yeah, and I love it. And as you're speaking through that, I've just recently been working with a large corporate, in especially the senior executives. And one of the obvious, we were looking at mindset and the importance of mindset and how that impacts how we do anything. And one of the clear areas that I was noticing was, at a leadership level, everyone was very unclear about the purpose. And because I was tasked to be there for a very specific set of content, when I realized the purpose wasn't even available to them, we started having a whole different conversation, because everyone really doesn't know why they're there and what they're doing and what the next 6 months look like. So I absolutely resonate with that. One of the things that I do want to ask, from your experience and your perspective is, why do companies still struggle with purpose? When you hear it from your context, when you see it on the flip side of that, we know, because we understand, you've got to understand why you get up in the day. You've got to understand why you're doing it. Yet, so many coaches and experts out there still work on purpose as this very, very big understanding of why business does. Why do we still get it wrong? Why do businesses get it wrong still?
Well, so my tax guy had a statement that I'm going to share with you. The more complex the question, the simpler the answer. The more simple the question, the more complex the answer. For example, is it tax deductible? Well, it depends on many, 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 many things. You just asked me a very simple question that has a very complicated answer. So I can give you some of the reasons that I believe are why. And I want to preface this by saying that why we don't is less important than the fact that we need to.
Yeah.
So many of the reasons why people don't is because it's of the profit motive. Why are we in business? To make a profit. Done. I have a saying, profit without purpose is pointless, because it's not sustainable. But that's one of the big reasons. Another of the big reasons is because people don't look at truth. They look at fantasy. They look at what they want to see and see what they want to believe is truth, even though it's not. What do I mean? Ask a lawyer, ask a grocer, ask a construction company. What is your purpose? My purpose is to protect people and give legal advice. My purpose is to sell food. My purpose is to build buildings. No, it's not. That's not what your purpose is. I have a lot of clients in agriculture who are both farmers and custodians of the land. And there's two elements of that. There's the delivery of water. They're typically known as water companies. You think of them in cities. You don't think of them in rural areas, but every farm has to have a source of water, and they get it from water companies. One of the problems farms have that cities don't have is anytime you put water on land, if it's too much water, it floods. If it's not enough water, it's drought. So you've got to manage the water. So you're always putting water on or taking water off. When you put water on or take water off, what happens? The dirt moves. So it's not just water, it's what's called reclamation or maintenance of the land. So you've got reclamation districts and you've got water districts. The reclamation districts do most of their work in the winter with flooding, but they both work hand in hand. Why are they in, what is their purpose? Water and flooding. It's to keep the water off when it floods and to get the water on when they need it. No, that's not your purpose. Your purpose is to help the people whose land you're in charge of grow crops. That's your purpose. You're there to help them grow crops. Whatever you have to do to help them grow crops, that's your purpose. And if they ain't growing crops and they're not doing it successfully, you got to find a way to do whatever you can to help them grow those crops. I've asked every one of my clients, and none of them came up with that till I said it. They said, you guys are so focused on the water. What's the next? Who cares about the water? What difference does the water make? Well, the farmers will get mad. But what if the farmers get mad? Well, then they'll drill wells. There's always an excuse. No, you got to get to what your purpose is. There's a company that I was heavily involved with for many years. It was a charter school company. It was started because the founder's son was treated like an idiot because he didn't have a particular set of knowledge. But the kid was brilliant. He could take a brand new vehicle apart, put it back together, and it'd run better than it did when it came off the assembly. But he wasn't book smart. He wasn't school smart. So this guy started a charter school with a very different approach. And he started and he had a vision and he had clarity of purpose. Vision, what we want to be when we grow up. What's the big, hairy, audacious goal? That's one chunk of purpose. Their purpose was to change the way education works. That's big. That's our purpose. We want to make people productive human beings that can live happy lives, live productively, contribute to society, not be a drain. That's what we want. We want to teach people how to be that. And we teach them how to do that by teaching them the joy of learning. And we teach them the joy of learning by, and I could keep doing this, right? But you begin to see that we're not we're not a school, right? We're here to build productive human beings. And the building of the productive human beings is our proof scenario that we've got a better way to run a school. So our vision, our goal, our purpose is to change the way education works in this country, because legally we can do that. So another reason that people don't do it is because they believe everybody knows what it is and they don't think they need to write it down. And the minute you write it down, you realize how hard it is. I'll tell you one last story. This is 20 seconds. I was in a very high-end mastermind group, tens of thousands of dollars a year with people, and I was the mouse. I was the mouse in this group of people. My business was the smallest. There were 16 of us. One guy spent 7 years trying to figure out what his purpose was. He was in the mortgage business. When he figured out how to document his purpose, he went from $1 billion a year to $1 billion a month.
Wow.
In sales.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's insane. That's how important it is. Think of all the waste. Think of the waste of not having that clarity.
Yeah, and with beautiful evidence like that, you start really understanding, do the work and take the time to understand it, because when you do and when it lands, everything changes, right? But Larry, also you speak about the concept of in retail where the customer is always right, and in non-retail B2B, the wholesale, the customer is always wrong. Tell us that insight, because it's fascinating to hear.
In a retail environment, you are basically selling based on price. Not always. It's not 1,000% true, but most retail is commoditized, right? I can buy it from more than one place. There's very few retailers that have no competition. So you have to be careful with your customers. You have to let them be right and find a way to help them understand what they need to know that they're not willing to accept because they're blinded by their wants, by their emotions, by their feelings, by their opinions, by their history. In wholesale, you're not talking to me because you're doing well. You're talking to me because you have a need. And depending upon your perception of that need, you might even be in trouble. Now, I don't work with companies in distress. I only work with very successful companies. But I always like to say, who do you think your biggest competitor is? And you can imagine the answers I get. I'll tell you the answer I almost never get. We are our greatest competitor. We are constantly struggling to find our own weak spots and where we're vulnerable and how we can get better, because we know every one of our competitors is doing that to us. We know we need to do that better than they are, or they're going to beat us. So when you get into that wholesale world, you have to be able to have value. You have to be able to have purpose. And you go to that customer and he says, I need you to help me with this. And you have to be able to say, that's not your problem. That's a symptom of your problem. And the simplest proof of that I can give you is every business that ever failed, every one of them that I interviewed over those 23 years, when I asked them, why did you fail? They said, well, we ran out of money. No, all that is a lagging indicator of prior bad decisions. That has nothing to do with why you failed, right?
Yeah.
We had an orphanage, a foster home company, and they hired us to help them because they were overloaded and felt like their social workers were not doing enough, doing their jobs properly and doing their jobs efficiently. And they wanted us to come in and help them improve the efficacy of their operational performance. And we got in there, and I knew before we even went in, the minute a prospect tells me what the problem is, I know that that's not the problem. I know that's the symptom. So what we found was that social workers were killing themselves, and they were struggling because they were overloaded. So they weren't able to do their jobs well, but it looked different to management. And what we found was the problem was that management had failed to integrate the existing foster families into their operational programs. All the foster families wanted the organization to succeed. They were grateful for the kids they had and wanted to help and wanted to contribute. And the minute we identified that as the problem, they reached out to their entire world of foster families and said, would you be willing to help us? Almost universally, everybody said, we'd love to help you. Tell us what to do. Suddenly the load was off the staff. Everything got streamlined. Everybody was happy. The stress went away. The problem solved. We figured out what the problem was. Had nothing to do with the social workers. Yeah. That's why in wholesale, the customer is always wrong.
I love it. Now, you mentioned marketing a little bit earlier, and one of the chapters that you dedicate to your book is why a chapter on marketing at least, and nothing on sales, public relations, or business development. Tell us, what was your thinking around?
Right. Well, a friend of mine said to me when he saw the table of contents, he said, how can you write a business book without talking about sales or finance? And I said, well, sales or finance are just tactical skill sets. You can hire anybody to do that. That doesn't take any brain power. That just takes tactical skills. What takes brain power is marketing. Let me explain my position on this a little bit more fully. For me, I think of the business world, the interaction of the business world to the outside world as kind of being underneath this umbrella. And because I'm a firm believer that a business that isn't growing is dying, I believe you have to have constant growth. Doesn't mean revenue growth, doesn't mean profit growth. It could be geographic growth, it could be staff growth, it could be product growth, it could be service growth, it could be anything. That there has to be some form of growth on a continuous basis. That all lives under this umbrella that's called business development. Under business development, you've got three things. You've got PR, marketing, and sales. PR is communicating your value to anybody. How many underage or sober alcoholics do you think watch sports? Everybody advertises beer there.
Yeah.
They're not going to buy beer. That's PR. That's just telling the world that you're there. That's okay if you're big enough, if you're trying to create a brand name. But for 99.9% of the world, that's not what they need, right? If you have a compartmentable market, maybe. Marketing is the key. Marketing has always been the key. It's understanding your market, what they need to be successful, and how do you deliver it to them in a way that makes them better and do it easier on them so that you have a competitive advantage that means something, that's worth paying for. Because when the deal's done, they've made more money. They're better off. I'm in Europe now. I was talking to somebody who's an entrepreneur and she struggled. She said, I can't work for anybody anymore. I've got to start my own business. And I said, well, what about working for these people? And she said, well, they're part of a very large corporation. I said, well, I come from America. And in America, there's always a profit motive. But here, it's not a profit motive. So tell me, what's important to them? What do you need to give them that would make them want you to be part of their organization as a consultant, as a support person? She says, the thing that's most important to them above everything else is their reputation. Okay, let's figure out how to enhance their reputation. Let's figure out what will deteriorate their reputation. And let's figure out a way for you to take your products and services and offer it to them as if it were a way to help reinforce the existing reputation and strengthen it as time moves forward and the world changes. That's marketing. That's not sales. That's understanding your customer, understanding what's going to drive them, and understanding how you can help them be more successful. Sales starts when you walk in the door and say, hey, I've got a great idea. You want to buy it?
Yeah.
So I don't care about PR and I don't care about sales. Those are machines. Those are tactical skills that either you got it or you don't. I care about teaching people what they need to do to be successful at marketing, which is why I said to you, I market differently. And it's why I, in the book, at the chapter, I don't know if you read it, but it says, if you've got right there at the top of the opening of that chapter on marketing, it says, if you've got marketing chops, skip this chapter, read the rest of the book. If you think you've found some good ideas that you like, come back and read the chapter. Maybe I'll teach you something, maybe I won't.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned that you disconnect business plans and marketing plans.
Yes.
So, and I think it ties into everything you were saying. Explain your thinking around that.
Business plan is a tool to anticipate a period of time in the immediate future so that you can make decisions, set milestones, do analysis, identify assumptions, identify risks, create mitigation strategies, and find out how well your expectations are being fulfilled. It's a relatively short period of time in the big picture of things, and it's something that you don't want to take lightly, you don't want to deviate from. It's operational. Marketing plans are about products, services, and markets. Every product, every service, and every market has its own cycle. You can't dictate those cycles. Those cycles dictate themselves to you. We were in the auto parts business. How many snow chains do you think we sold in July? None.
Yeah.
How much antifreeze do you think we sold in July? None. But in winter, it's 33 below zero without wind chill. Guess what? We stocked up and we changed our marketing strategy for those cold weather products for that window of time. So our marketing plan was based around the specific products, the specific geography, and the specific target market, right? It was added into the business plan as part of our financial projections, but not all year long. In the months it was relevant. But the business plan doesn't talk about how you market or how you sell. It talks about what your numbers are going to be. So the marketing plan has to give you that data, and you have to have a marketing plan that's designed specifically for each, looking for the right word, distinct market and distinct product and distinct service. Okay. You don't sell snow shovels at the same time you're selling air conditioning Freon. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you got to have a cold weather strategy for marketing and a hot weather strategy for marketing. And then you need to have a temperate weather strategy. If you're selling products that are impacted by the weather, look at the clothing stores. Every single one of them does it. If you're in a climate that has 4 seasons, all the winter stuff comes in the fall, all the summer stuff comes in the late winter, early spring, right? That's why, because the marketing has to be an independent thing. So I typically tell customers they need to have at least 2, if not 3, distinct separate marketing plans to cover their breadth of products and services and the markets they're selling to. But the business plan's different.
So, but you also mentioned in the book, you mentioned the arc of success. Just tell us about it and how it works.
So one of the things that I realized was that getting the answer to why businesses fail doesn't do any good if I can't help them survive. So what I uncovered through the aid of corporate life cycle theory is the study of how organizations age and die over time. And it's shockingly accurate because organizations are made up of people. And people age and die over time, just the same as they always have. We are born, we can't walk. We don't have teeth. We grow teeth. We go through puberty. We get hair. We lose our eyesight. Our joints fail. Our teeth fail. Eventually, our body parts fail and we die. We lose our reproductive. It's all very predictable. Different timelines, but the sequence doesn't change unless you're in an accident, right? If you just live your life, as predictable as the sun coming up in the east and setting in the west. Corporate life cycle theory is the same thing. It looks at the relative maturity of an organization over time and how and where it needs to focus. Now, there are different corporate life cycle theorists, so I don't deal with that. What I deal with is a particular segment of the market, and my model is based on 3 levels of organizational maturity. I call them youth, adolescence, and adulthood. And that came from the 3 organizational imperatives. If you are in youth and never develop your clarity of purpose, you will die. If you gain clarity of purpose, you will mature into adolescence and be given the opportunity to develop consistent performance. If you fail, you will die. If you develop consistent performance, then you're able to develop into adulthood, where if you don't develop engagement of people, you will die. So how do I define those? Well, first of all, it's organizational maturity is defined as the breadth and depth of experience, not knowledge, not skill, not expertise. Been there, done that, hands-on experience. Youth experience is narrow and shallow. We know what we do. We don't know a lot about our industry, but we know a lot about what we do. As you mature and gain more experience, the depth of your experience grows because you do more and more and more of it, and you get more experience with more customers and more, different environments, right? You don't tend to get broad. You don't tend to get outside of your lane. Once you get that nailed, that consistency of performance, then you start saying, okay, let's get out of our lane. How can we integrate into a bigger, larger world and continue our path of growth? You have to start getting broader in your view. You have to understand how other industries impact you, how other organizations impact you, how you fit into the life cycle of the environment you exist in, right? So your breadth becomes wide. So youth is narrow, shallow, adolescence is narrow, deep, and adulthood is broad, deep. Arc of success. Going through youth, the maturation process of youth to get you to adolescence is the arc of success. And here's the way it works. Somebody has an idea. When it works, it creates success. Success creates demand. Demand creates complexity. Complexity creates the need for controls. Controls create a loss of flexibility. And that's when you have to have a dramatic shift internally in your organization, because you're no longer free to behave the way you used to because you've lost flexibility. You still have some, you just don't have what you had before.
Yeah.
This is why people who run small companies or entrepreneurs make lousy big company managers and leaders, is because they're used to having total flexibility. They don't understand how to find the flexibility in more constraining environments. So you go through that in youth and you get into adolescence and you start all over again. We got to be better on our performance. We got to be more consistent. We got to figure out a way to do this. And so you come up with ideas and it creates success, and that success breeds growth, and that growth breeds complexity, and that complexity breeds the need for rules and controls. And suddenly you've lost more flexibility, right? So that's the arc of success. And I have a really wonderful graph that anybody that buys the book, we couldn't get it in the book quickly enough. We didn't have it ready. Anybody that buys the book, all they have to do is reach out to me and I'll give it to them. It's not on the website yet, but it's going to be on the website within another 30 or 45 days. There's a new website coming out. But it shows very clearly how this works. And it's when I talk to people about the problems they're having, they go, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Let me say one more thing. Part of this is, how do I fix it, right? How do I create clarity of purpose? How do I create consistency of performance? How do I create engagement? There are 3 things in youth, 3 things in adolescence, and 2 things in adulthood. I have an assessment, and the only way to get it is to buy the book. It's in the back of the book, doesn't cost you anything. Takes anywhere from 2 to 6 minutes to go through it. It's a multiple choice, very easy, very simple, yes, no, multiple choice survey, and it will rank all 8 of those leading non-financial indicators in their order of relative weakness. So your weakest will be first and your strongest will be 8th. And that's what I have every prospect do. And then I come in and I say, this is what you need to fix. It's always one of the first 3. And I don't say the first one because sometimes if you're in a financial pinch, one of those first 3 will have an immediate impact on your finances. I can't tell you which one it will be. I just know that that's true based on the research. But I always say, if you're in a financial pinch, you can't let yourself run out of money. That's the one we're going to attack first. If it's 3rd, we're going to start there. If it's 2nd, we're going to start there. Then we'll go back, we'll fix that, then we'll reevaluate, and then we'll start at number 1 and work our way down. So that's the arc of success, and that's how the whole puzzle kind of fits together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I love it. For anyone listening today, what do you want to share with people about this conversation? Why should they go out and buy this book? Why? What is this? What is that for you?
Well, first of all, the reason they want to buy the book is because it's going to cost them 6 figures to hire me. So it's cheap. My dream, my purpose is what I call no help wanted ads. That's my goal. I want everybody that has a job to love it and to love their boss and to be happy and enjoy their work and be able to live a good and rich and fulfilling life. And I want everybody that has employees to love them and be happy with them and treat them with respect and run a good organization and take care of their employees and their customers and their vendors. If you follow this model, you'll do that. And you won't need to look for people because nobody will want to leave your company. You'll suddenly have almost no turnover. There's always going to be turnover. People get sick, people move, things happen. You can't have 0 turnover. But I've watched companies that have an average tenure of over 25 years with 400 employees. That's pretty rare. They have created an environment that's very healthy and sustainable. So the reason they should buy this book is if they care about surviving success and being good, this book will give them all the information they need. All you need to do is understand it. And if you're smart enough and competent enough, you'll figure out what you need to do. If you're not, there's a dozen other ways to get help. You can call other consultants, say, help me with this. You can take one of my programs, or you can hire me as a direct consultant. But that's why they should buy the book. Because I don't make money on the book. You know that. You know books. Authors don't make money on books.
Yeah, I've written one. It doesn't make a lot of money. Great. So his new book, Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. And that's from Larry Mandelberg. Larry, thank you for being here. Thank you for just spending some time and giving us such a wonderful, fruitful thinking process through business. Some of your perspectives I really align with. So I'm definitely going to check this out. Larry, thank you for being here. Yeah, we will. Where's the best place for us to get hold of this? And where do we go and get the book? What is that?
Mandelberg.biz or businessesdon'tfail.com.
There we go. Guys, the links will be in the description boxes below, so go and check it out. Larry, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And it's been fun having you.
Kevin, thank you for allowing me the opportunity. I wish all of your listeners great success.